Thanks for doing the interview here with us.
Okay.
Well, this is your first time on the road in 17 years. What's it like being back out?
Quite nice. It's just long enough to get the feel.
George Harrison trusted very few people. He grew up with very little in Liverpool, fought to be heard in the biggest band in the world, and spent years watching others take the spotlight while his own voice waited in the shadows. His songs were often pushed aside. His marriage fell apart. His home was invaded by a man with a knife. But even those moments don't fully capture the quiet betrayals that cut the deepest, especially the one that came from someone he trusted, someone who sat at his table and smiled while crossing a line that would end their relationship forever. George Harrison was born on February 25, 1943, in a small terraced house at 12 Arnold Grove in Wavertree, Liverpool. It was a cramped home with no indoor toilet, just an outdoor shared facility, and a single coal fire that struggled to warm the space. For children shared tight rooms, and comfort was a luxury they didn't know. Yet inside that small house was something powerful, a sense of closeness, resilience, and imagination. George was the youngest of Harold and Louise Harrison's children. Life wasn't easy, especially during wartime rationing, but the home wasn't cold in spirit. Years later, George would reflect on how that feeling of being boxed in pushed him toward music. It became his escape, his doorway out. When the family moved to a slightly larger council house in Speke around 1950, it felt like a step forward. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him breathing room, and for George, that space turned into ambition. His father, Harold, had lived a tough life. A former ship steward who once tried his luck in America before returning broke, he later became a bus driver in Liverpool. He worked long hours through wartime blackouts, helping keep the city moving. George admired him deeply. Harold didn't fully understand his son's musical dreams, but he didn't stand in the way either. George's mother, Louise, played an even bigger role. She encouraged his passion, bought him his first guitar, and supported his late-night practice sessions. While other parents might have discouraged such obsession, she leaned into it. That support became the foundation of everything that followed. At school, George wasn't exceptional in the traditional sense. He passed the 11+ exam and attended the Liverpool Institute, but he struggled with the rigid system. He found it boring, restrictive, and uninspiring. Instead, he spent his time sketching guitars, skipping classes, and dreaming of something bigger. It was during this time that he began crossing paths with Paul McCartney on the bus. What started as casual conversations about music quickly turned into a deeper connection. Eventually, Paul introduced George to John Lennon's band, the Quarrymen. At first, John hesitated. George was younger, quieter. But everything changed one day on the top deck of a bus when George played Raunchy on his guitar with near-perfect precision. That moment erased all doubt. He wasn't just a kid, he was a musician. George joined the band at just 14 years old. From there, things moved quickly. He left school at 16 to pursue music full-time, a decision that seemed reckless to many but felt completely natural to him. The band's early days were rough, especially during their time in Hamburg. Long hours, exhausting performances, and difficult living conditions pushed them to their limits, but it also transformed them into a tight, professional unit. George was deported from Germany at one point for being underage, but even then, he made sure the band could continue by teaching his parts before leaving. It was a small act that showed how important he already was. By 1962, the Beatles' classic lineup was complete. Success followed quickly, but inside the band, George often found himself pushed aside. John and Paul dominated the songwriting, leaving little room for him. Album after album, his contributions were limited to one or two songs. The media labeled him the Quiet Beatle, but that label hid a growing frustration. He had ideas, songs, and a voice, but not the space to express them. Instead of giving up, George turned inward. In the mid-1960s, he discovered Indian music and spirituality, which would change his life. Learning the sitar and studying under Ravi Shankar, he brought a completely new sound into the Beatles' music. Songs like Within You Without You showed a depth and direction that set him apart. But even as he evolved artistically, tensions within the band grew. By 1969, things were breaking down. During the Get Back sessions, George felt increasingly sidelined and disrespected. One day, after another frustrating exchange, he simply walked out, saying, "See you around the clubs." For a moment, it looked like the band might replace him. They didn't, but the damage was done. The Beatles officially split in 1970. While the world reacted with shock, George felt something closer to relief. For the first time, he was free to create without limits. And he didn't waste the opportunity. Later that year, he released All Things Must Pass, a massive triple album filled with songs that had been rejected during his Beatles years. It was a powerful statement, proof that he had always been more than the quiet one. The album was a huge success, topping charts worldwide and earning critical acclaim. Songs like My Sweet Lord became global hits, blending spirituality with mainstream appeal in a way few artists had done before. For a moment, George stood at the top, arguably even ahead of his former bandmates. But success didn't protect him from personal pain. His marriage to Pattie Boyd, once full of love and creativity, began to fall apart. George's growing distance and infidelity created cracks that couldn't be repaired. And then came the betrayal that would define this chapter of his life. Eric Clapton, one of George's closest friends, fell deeply in love with Pattie. He didn't hide it. He confessed his feelings, even channeling them into his music. Eventually, Pattie left George in 1974 and later married Clapton. It was a deeply personal betrayal, one that cut far deeper than professional struggles ever had. Though George publicly remained calm, privately the wound lingered. His relationship with Clapton was never the same. Life moved on, but challenges continued. In 1999, George survived a terrifying attack when an intruder broke into his home and stabbed him multiple times. His wife, Olivia, fought off the attacker and likely saved his life. Though he recovered, the incident left lasting physical and emotional scars. Health issues followed. After battling cancer in the late 1990s, the disease returned in 2001. Despite treatment, George Harrison passed away on November 29, 2001, at the age of 58. He died peacefully, surrounded by family and close friends. A year later, a tribute concert brought together the people who had been part of his journey. Music filled the room once again, not as a performance, but as a celebration of a life that had touched millions. George Harrison's story is not just about fame or music. It's about patience, resilience, and finally finding your voice after years of being unheard. It's about betrayal and forgiveness, loss and growth. He may have started as the quiet Beatle, but in the end, his voice echoed louder than anyone expected. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification so you never miss the next deep dive into stories that matter.